You might have heard of Bryan Johnson. He's this millionaire who's using about $2 million a year, even more maybe, to optimize for longevity. He wants to live as long as possible, and he has a lot of resources at hand. He sold Venmo for about $800 million years ago. And so he has a lot of resources, and he has a singular mission to live as long as possible. And he's spending a lot of resources, time, energy, money on this. He's putting it all online. So it's all on his Blueprint website. It's actually an amazing resource. He's testing a bunch of different things. It's an N of one experiment, and he's using evidence-based, protocols. He has a team of scientists. He has, his nutrition is dialed in, his exercise is dialed in. Everything is according to an algorithm. Essentially, he doesn't put any thought into any aspect of this. Everything is just taken care of. His team tells him what to do, and he does this, and he tracks everything, every single biomarker. 81 different organs in his body are being tracked continuously: heart, liver, pancreas, anything you can imagine. It's even skin health. And so he's going to these extremes, and he started a discussion around this. This is a man with a lot of resources, and he's doing this. But what does a regular person do? What does you or me? What do the rest of us do? Do we have a chance of even doing anything close to this? And the answer to that question very simply is yes. You do not have to put in the resources that Bryan Johnson is doing to get the vast majority of the benefits of what he's actually doing. And there's this thing called the Pareto principle. Most people might have heard of. The 80-20 rule is another way to think about it. But literally, 20% of the effort drives 80% of the results. And we could even go beyond that. We could do probably maybe 5% of the things and get the vast majority. I'm talking about over 80% of the actual results that Bryan Johnson is likely getting. And this is interesting because I actually, when he posted some of these things, I actually replied to him, and there was someone who said, "Hey, what are the most straightforward things that you or I could do?" And I actually replied with outlining 5 different steps. And Bryan Johnson actually came in and actually replied to that tweet saying, "Yeah, this is actually a pretty good summary. Let me actually just show you that right now." I have it here. One second. So this is the tweet that I wrote. Essentially, someone said, "Can you please create a less intense version of the blueprint?" And I said, "Blueprint can get overwhelming. And here are 5 things that someone can do." And I'm going to share these things. And then Bryan Johnson himself said a great summary, and that it can be overwhelming at first. So I want to go through these 5 things now, though. I want to go through this list of 5 things. I'm going to start with number one. Number one on that list is stop or reduce your most self-destructive habit. Now, I've talked a ton with clients. I've worked with over 1,000 clients. I work in health optimization and longevity. We prioritize things like nutrition, movement, sleep. These are the biggest drivers of everything. But one of the main things that everyone needs to do essentially is work on stopping your most self-destructive habit. And this, the thing is, every single person has a self-destructive habit, right? Or we have many self-destructive habits. And the first step in this is identifying what that is. And it's going to be different for different people. For certain people, it's that late night eating or the late night binging. It could be media consumption that could, trigger our mental health in different ways. It could be, just lack of physical activity, sitting on your desk too much. Whatever it is, everybody has one thing that over time is compounding in a highly negative way. And that's the one thing that you want to stop. And I'm going to give you some examples here when I talk to certain clients. So for instance, and this is going to go into number 2 on the list, which is actually prioritize sleep. Sleep is a lighthouse that's going to give you the energy and the motivation to do everything else that's important. But I was working with a client once, and she said, I wake up tired in the morning. I don't have a lot of energy. I don't feel that great. And we went through all the different things that she was doing. And she had this habit essentially, late at night, she worked really hard. She was spending about 30 to 45 minutes on just Instagram, social media, late at night, just scrolling endlessly. This would keep her up. There was no consistency in her sleep schedule. And so there was a lot of inconsistency in when she woke up and how she felt the next day. And this is even independent of the actual the negative mental health effects of likely scrolling Instagram, stimulating your brain, the blue light, everything else that's happening from that habit late at night. And it was just kind of draining her. It might seem so simple, but actually it's things like this that are consequential. And the question I asked her was, what would happen, do you think, if you replace that one Instagram habit later in the day with a consistent bedtime instead, and then that you use that 20 to 30 minutes instead to read or listen to some sort of, calming audiobook, essentially, like something that was going to put you in a more relaxed state as opposed to a stimulated state, and then you go to bed at a consistent time. What would happen if you made that one change in your life? And even a broader question I asked her is, imagine you 5 or 10 years from now, and one version of you has this Instagram habit, and the other person you has this book reading habit at the end of the night. How different would those people look 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Those paths would be very divergent, meaning they would probably be very, very different people just based on that content consumption alone, but also based on health, meaning that the compound impact of, sleeping well would be massive over 5 years, right? That alone would just change so many things. You would have more motivation in the morning. You would feel better in the morning. And so sometimes these simple tweaks that we're not always aware of, that really make the biggest changes in our lives. And so that's an example of maybe a self-destructive habit that can make a very, very positive change in the long term. Okay. So stop your most self-destructive habit. For some people, it's alcohol consumption. I know for me, when I drink alcohol the next day, I don't feel as good. It has there's a loop, a feedback loop that happens that's very negative. And so it's something that I want to stay away from. I want to enjoy a glass of wine here or there with friends, but in general, it has a very negative effect on just how I feel and then my productivity the next day, right? And that's what I value a lot. So different people have different things. Identify your most self-destructive habit, work on changing it. Number 2 is sleep. Sleep, Bryan Johnson says this, sleep is a lighthouse, meaning it is the fundamental thing that affects everything else. The most important things in your body happen during sleep. Everything from hormone regeneration, neurotransmitter synthesis happens during sleep, during REM sleep, when you're dreaming, essentially. Physical rejuvenation happens during deep sleep. To have the energy to move the next day, you need proper deep sleep. So almost everything rejuvenative in the body happens during sleep. You need to make this a major part of your day. I don't know many people who sleep amazing and don't feel good. Like, this is just a very straightforward thing. I know a ton of people who don't sleep great, and they're having all sorts of issues. They're on psychiatric medications for depression, anxiety, so many different things, because everything in your brain regenerates, replenishes during sleep. So if you're not sleeping well, it's going to affect or destroy your quality of life. Bryan Johnson talks about this, where he was essentially just depressed and suicidal for many, many years because he would overeat late at night, and then he wasn't able to sleep well, and that affected everything else. So sleep is a lighthouse. Get that one thing right, and that will have major, major benefits. Even things like Alzheimer's disease, it can potentially have a preventative effect on progression of something like that. So sleep is number 2 on that list. Number 3 on that list, eat nutrient-dense whole foods. This is so, so important, meaning what we consume is who we are. It makes up every single cell in our body. Is the food we put into our body, right? It is something that there's so much processed garbage out there, and I am guilty of eating that processed garbage. I grew up on that processed garbage, but and that's probably why I dealt with anxiety, health issues, all these other chronic issues. So there's no supplement on the market that is going to replace food. So you have to prioritize whole foods, nutrient dense foods, real food. That is just the starting point. Food is one of the most confusing topics for most people, and there's a lot I could go into on food, and I will be going into a lot on nutrition and food with a lot of other videos, so stay tuned for that. But just in general, just a general recommendation for nutrition, whole foods. So something like a Mediterranean style diet is pretty good. Healthy amounts of fish, cruciferous vegetables, berries, healthy olive oils, healthy fats. These are the things we want to think about. So think about nutrient density, think about fiber, think about protein intake, but whole nutrient dense foods. You don't want to be snacking a lot throughout the day. You want to have a eating window of around 11 to 10 hours ideally. You don't want to eat too close to bedtime, but that's number 3 on that list. Number 4 on that list, be active. Exercise and movement is so, so important. This doesn't mean you have to go to the gym for an hour a day, every single day. This is actually very unnatural for most people. Only about 10% of the population actually goes to the gym. But you need to prioritize movement. The healthiest people on this planet, they just move a lot throughout the day. They have lifestyles that are conducive to movement. They have environments that allow them to move a lot. What do we mostly do these days, including me? we're sitting on the chair most of the time, right? We're in front of a computer maybe. So you need to make this a part of your life. I love to get movement in the morning. I like to be active in the morning. I like to go outside, get some sunshine, be active, maybe play some tennis, do some strength training, mobility work, and stretching becomes more and more important as we get older. Start slow. If you're having a hard time with movement, just start with walking. Especially walking after you eat food is so helpful for people. Just try and get close to 7,500, 10,000 steps. Start with that. Build on that. Choose a sport or a hobby. It's so much easier to prioritize movement when you're working towards something, especially in a social setting. Pickleball, go play pickleball. Go play tennis, even better. Tennis is the best sport you can play for longevity. I'm going to put out a video and an article on that. Go play team sports, things that make you active. Take the stairs whenever possible. Taking 2 to 3 flights of stairs every single day is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest at the end of 5 years. Do not, essentially, these compound effects of movement practices are massive. So just prioritizing walking whenever possible, taking the stairs whenever possible, over a lot of years, you will maintain really good mobility, which is essential. You want to think of movement as something that positively affects every single biological function in your body. Every single physiological function in your body is affected by movement. Your brain, most of all, your lymphatic system, the drainage, it is way beyond calories and weight. Movement affects everything. So that's number 4 on the list. The last thing on the list to kind of simplify the blueprint, to simplify longevity, is regular just testing, diagnostic testing, blood work, and especially tracking different biomarkers. You want to understand your hemoglobin A1C. You want to understand your blood lipids, things like LDL cholesterol, apolipoprotein B, LP little a. These are major indicators of cardiovascular health. Heart disease is the #1 killer worldwide. When we think about what actually kills people, it's cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic disorders, neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And these are all related too. And we could make a significant dent in all of these things if we're tracking certain biomarkers. Just to give you an example, if we looked at your hemoglobin A1C, your fasting glucose, and your insulin level, we would get a phenomenal idea of your metabolic health. If what you're eating is affecting you in a negative way, it's affecting your energy levels. And based on that, we can give you very specific guidance on what to do. Because if you're metabolically unhealthy, meaning if you have diabetes, if your hemoglobin A1C goes above 6.4, this doubles the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. I mean, it's wild. So you need to keep metabolic health in order. It even affects neurodegenerative disease progression. So keeping your hemoglobin A1C ideally below 5.2 is so important. But that's some of the things we want to go over: the lipid panel, kidney and liver function, inflammation markers like HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. This is a very good indicator of chronic inflammation. And so there's a lot of different things. Vitamin and nutrient levels. I would say about 80% of people I see are deficient in vitamin D to some extent. That means sub 30. They're below 30. They have no idea. And you need to take vitamin D3 with K2. There's ways to optimize these things. And we want to correlate this with how you're actually feeling, improvements in health outcomes. We want to track you regularly. And this allows us to optimize for things like movement and especially nutrition. It gives you much more guidance on nutrition. So get your blood work done. Get it through your doctor. I know a doctor is not always the most, they don't go in depth into this, but there's a lot of resources out there that you could use. And as long as you're tracking it regularly, you'll have a better idea of what to do. So those are the 5 things, okay? Once again, stop or reduce your most self-destructive habit, prioritize sleep, eat whole, nutrient-dense foods, be active, and number 5, track your blood work regularly so you can see changes and you're not just relying on instinct. What gets tracked and measured, it can be altered in a positive way. So make sure you're doing that. And this alone will get you the vast majority of the results from Bryan Johnson's blueprint. If you are doing those things alone, you will get so much returns on life. You will feel good. You will feel amazing. And hopefully you'll live and be as healthy as possible. And you are doing this for your loved ones. You want your loved ones to feel that way as well. Poor health takes a devastating toll, not only on the individual, but on your friends, your family, on your communities. prioritize good health, how you feel. And the more you do that, the better even just society in general becomes. And it can be very straightforward to do. So I'll post all of this. All of this, you can also find it on my Twitter. You can find it on Instagram. It'll be on YouTube. I'll be having a lot more videos going over this in more detail, but it does not have to be complicated. So start small, baby steps, habits, routines. Stop your most self-destructive habit. Feel free to ask me any of the questions you have in the comments here, and we go from there. Hope you found it informative.